Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Quigley on Divorce, a behind-the-scenes look. I'm your host, James Quigley, and I'm joined with, remotely, star associate attorney Jordan Rosenberg. Jordan, thanks again for joining.
How's it going, James? Happy to be here.
And I know that Jordan and I have done some podcasts before. Typically, when you see us, we're sitting in one of our conference rooms at the office together. But amidst these crazy times, oh man, I just touched my face. Again, one of those things you're not supposed to do. But we're
wash your hands, James.
We're trying to stay busy. We're really active in terms of keeping our clients' cases moving and trying to help those who may be in need of help that these kind of strange times have heightened their situations. But one of the things that Jordan and I thought would be helpful for everyone out there, our viewers and listeners, is he and I and our Instagram accounts oftentimes get a lot of direct messages and people actually ask questions. And so we've been fielding some questions, writing them down, and I just thought some of those questions would be insightful during these times, and some of the things that would be poignant for you guys, regardless of what your situation is. So Jordan has a list, and I've written down a few things on my list here, and I think we'll just go through a couple of those. We'll try not to take a lot of your time, but I think some of the questions our viewers and listeners have are probably questions you guys might have. So Jordan, you want to fire away with your first, or do you want me to take it?
I'm happy to. So it's interesting because we get a lot of questions, not only from people who are in a divorce, but people who have recently gotten divorced and who are also contemplating divorce. So it's sort of there's a lot of implications to especially what's going on right now with Corona.
Yeah.
And so I guess the first question comes from a listener who said verbatim, "I'm at my wit's end. I'm stuck in the same house with my wife. Should I wait to file divorce, or what could I be doing right now?"
And actually that dovetails into a question, and they're similar, and I'll just say the question I had is, can I get a divorce while the courts are closed?
Right.
So I think there's a couple parts to that. The question is, what should I do? What can I do? The first thing we always tell prospective clients is, don't do anything rash. If you've been married, if you've got children, you got a family, marriage is important. And again, we're all under a lot of stress. So if there's an opportunity to reach out to a mental health professional, I know a lot of them are doing things remotely. And so maybe you can get on do some marital counseling, maybe even a priest or a pastor or a rabbi or something, may be able to do things remotely. So I guess the first thing that we would say is try not to do anything rash during these very unusual times. If you're past that point and you've tried, to save your marriage, and you're at a point where you're now saying it's become really clear in these crazy times, I need to move forward. Can you get a divorce? Yeah. Jordan, I think you're working now on a petition for dissolution of marriage on a client that just hired us a day ago. And he just,
yeah. I mean, it's really sort of, I certainly agree with you, James, that obviously it's not our job to tell you to get divorced. But if you're at peace with that position, it's sort of business as usual for us. The courts are still open in terms of filing things and in terms of, starting the case. And how I would answer this is I would say, listen, if it's not something that would make you uncomfortable, and this is what we talked about in our last podcast, and like living in the same quarters as your spouse, where if it's really going to heat things up, maybe it's not a good idea in that perspective, but at least be proactive, and you can reach out to us, get your ducks in a row, start to get organized, be prepared, start gathering your documents, get your questions answered, and start at least planning to a certain extent and getting your questions answered by an attorney, so you can be legally prepared as well as psychologically prepared when the time comes.
Yeah, I think that point you made, Jordan, about contacting an attorney, and obviously we'd recommend you contact us, but so many people that are at the precipice of a divorce have so many questions, and there's so much uncertainty around it. Sometimes there's other issues of domestic violence. You have addiction problems. Sometimes you have mental health problems. We deal with narcissism regularly. start having the conversation with lawyers to understand what are your rights, what might your obligations be, assuming the process is going to move forward, what options do you have even regarding process? In other words, can we do this collaboratively? Can we mediate? Is this going to be a litigation case where there's going to be a judge is going to have to decide? You should be strategizing with your lawyer. And then, as you mentioned, Jordan, there's a lot of things that we do at the start of a case that are organizational. There's a financial affidavit that everyone has to complete, and it's kind of labor intensive. It's, it's not overwhelming, but it takes some time. And so our paralegals are still working.
Yep.
They can be done remotely. There's some financial records and documents that you're going to have to gather and produce. And so there really is an opportunity to be productive and to be prepared so that when the courts are open, if we need to utilize the courts, we can do that. And there are many cases we don't even go to court. So there's, it really starts with getting the right advice. And once you've gotten the right advice, develop your strategy and then begin to implement it.
Agreed.
So
ready for the next one?
Fire away.
Okay. So it said, I just noticed my husband's retirement account dropped 30%. How will that be factored into any settlement or any negotiation?
Yeah. I had a client call and he said, you think I should file now because this is the right time to do it? I'll say this. I just don't think that the market is going to dictate anything in any kind of divorce. In other words, I don't think someone's going to take advantage of someone because the market has dropped and the other person is blindly going to say, oh, okay, I'll take 30% less than what I would have gotten a month ago. The fact of the matter is what we've been doing, in cases we're still actively trying to settle, is we're looking at how the assets were held. And so in other words, let's say you had 1,000 shares of Apple stock. Well, the stock is down. We're not going to accept 50% of the value, but we might accept 50% of the Apple stock. So that when the market returns to its, some form or another, it's going to go back up, that at least you're getting the value of that stock as it grows. And so our message, I think, to our clients is no one's pushing the panic button. This is a depressed time for us. I think it's more of a cash flow issue currently, making sure mortgage payments are made, making sure expenses are paid, car notes, and so on and so forth. That you don't jeopardize an asset, that you don't risk losing an asset in foreclosure or something like that. But as far as the market, your 401k dropped, your investment account dropped. We're not sounding any alarm bells. And I don't think anybody's really going to be taken advantage of to be so naive as to say, oh, geez, the market's dropped, so I just get less. And then the other person's going to keep all the stock. And when it recovers, they're going to be up 30%. So right. Don't freak out, I think is the message there.
Yeah. And I mean, and that said, I think it's a good time to be diligent and ask the next question and say, hey, am I just getting this amount or am I getting these assets in kind? Don't touch your face, James.
Oh,
there you go. So
we're doing good on the social distancing,
yeah,
but
right.
I did wash my hands recently.
That's good. What I was saying is, I think, ask the next question and say, how are you getting these assets? And because if you think about it, it's 30, if you're dividing a retirement account, for example, and let's say the retirement account was $100,000 and everybody was getting, or, each party was getting 50%, maybe, that factors in to, maybe that's an argument you can make to say, maybe now I should be entitled to more or a higher percentage of the assets. Interesting thought. But, I'm with you, James. I think just be proactive, ask that next question, and, understand how the division of certain assets are going to work.
I think that raises a really interesting point because we oftentimes, Jordan, as you know, have sometimes in cases the client who is less sophisticated in the financial holdings of the marriage. And to me, this is an excellent opportunity to understand what's in that portfolio. If there's $1 million of stock, it's easy to look at the one line item that says, we got $1 million. Okay, we're dividing $1 million. But the stocks that comprise that portfolio are probably more important than its current value. Do we have stocks that are are paying a dividend? Are those more valuable? Are those more conservative? Are there ones that, you know, are in a particular industry, be it tech versus oil versus what have you, that, you know, maybe we want more of these stocks versus those. But as a starting point, does your client even understand, or do you as a viewer or listener, do you understand how your holdings are actually structured? What have you invested in? What are the stocks that you actually own? Good time to probably ask those questions and try to find those answers.
Yep.
So
next.
Well, I've got the one that, you know, is just on the forefront of everyone's mind.
Bring it on.
It's a simple question. Do I have to turn my children over for visitation during the period of shutdown? So,
and I'll take this one. We spent a lot of time on our last podcast kind of talking about this. And again, it's like the influx of emails we've been getting and calls and, you know, DMs are just, this is the most popular concept, I think.
Yeah.
Is that there really is no law, right? So the governor's order, which shuts down, you know, shelter in place, it specifically has a carve out for parenting time exchanges with a custody judgment or pursuant to an order. Okay, well, does it dictate? What if you don't have an order and you're trying to do things cooperatively between parents, right? It's more of a common sense thing. I mean, James, take over. You know, there's so much to say on this one.
Yeah. It's so, I think the hard part of us giving a straight answer on this is because nobody knows. In other words, if you have a court order that says you're supposed to turn your children over, it's Friday, typical exchange time. Friday night, that's left or 6 o'clock. You were supposed to have turned the children over, but you didn't feel that they would be safe. Maybe you called the pediatrician. The pediatrician said, no, it's really not a good idea. And you've called your spouse or your ex-spouse or the person you're in a divorce with and said, maybe we should do this. And they don't agree. Will the police come over and force the children to be turned over? I doubt it. But we don't know. Nobody knows. You know, if you don't turn the children over because, you know, maybe one of your children is actually sick, or someone you think in your spouse or ex-spouse's home might have been sick or exposed to someone that was sick, and you don't turn over, is that contempt of court? So that a week from now, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, July, whenever it is that the courts open again, your ex-spouse is now saying, I want my ex-spouse held in contempt of court because he or she didn't turn the children over on Friday afternoon during the coronavirus. Is anybody really going to hold that person in contempt of court for exercising reasonable judgment in light of these crazy times?
Right, and that's the kicker right there, is reasonable judgment. And you hope, one can only hope, that two parents can make reasonable decisions in light of what's going on here, right?
But unfortunately, the reason we're having this ongoing conversation with clients, with other lawyers on podcasts, is because people are displaying they can't.
Right.
Which is it's unfortunate for children because, you know, they're bored, they're out of their routine, they're not going back to school, their sports are canceled. It's just a horrible time. And so we would hope that as parents, as lawyers working with other lawyers, there would be some common sense, some element of reasonableness, some understanding that this is not ideal for anyone.
Right.
You know?
And yeah. And
go ahead.
No, it's no problem. So it's interesting also because the courts are closed, right? Like we talked about in other podcasts, and they're really only permitting quote unquote emergency orders. And, you know, the chief judge says, you know, don't come in here with stuff that's not an emergency, which again, we talked on our other podcast, is, you know, domestic violence, God forbid, or if something drastic happens. Now, we really don't have the ability to file a motion and say, Judge, we want a turnover tonight of the kid.
Can't do it.
And so what I guess the answer to that question is, again, and you'll hear a theme from me always, is be proactive, get on the phone with your lawyer. If you're, you know, first try to resolve it with your spouse. And if you can't, then of course it's a last resort, go to your attorney and at least start that conversation.
Jordan, I gotta jump in. I'm chuckling because this whole Zoom thing is new to me, right? And you keep hearing this dinging sound. It's because we've got email after email after email. It is 6:25 at night, and the emails just keep
Fair enough.
Questions are being asked. You know, people want to know these things, and there's some degree of uncertainty in all of this. And so to the extent you can try to step back, to be honest, and I've got 4 kids of my own, I'd highly recommend sending the kids to you need a break. It is,
Right.
you know, it is because the kids are going nuts. We're going nuts. Try to work something out. And and listen, summer's around the corner. We can do makeup time. We can try to do the right thing. So everybody gets their relationship with their kids.
Right.
But that's really been the one that in different forms, that question has been coming over and over and over again. What do you do?
Yep.
So Jordan, I think we got time for maybe one more. What's
let me pick one. So I'm going back and forth between 2, and I think we can knock out 2 if you're open to that.
Fire
James.
away. Let's get them in.
So one is I have a court date in the next 7 days. What do I do? Are deadlines going to be continued? Are we allowed to do more discovery? Like, what does this mean for my case?
Yeah, I'll just, a short answer is I'm going to use the same word we keep using over and over and over again. It's common sense and reasonableness. The fact of the matter is you're not going to be in court in 7 days, in all likelihood. Most of the counties in Illinois have been rescheduling things automatically. So we're getting notices from the clerk's office saying your case that was scheduled for March 27th is now going to be on May 2nd or whatever the date is. And so most things are being rescheduled. My guess is that when the courts do reopen, which it's supposed to be after Easter, but we don't know, there's going to be sort of an influx of people really trying to get into court, trying to get things done that weren't done that were previously scheduled. So, you know, again, I would temper your expectations that even when we get the system back open again and the courts are open again, there's going to be a delay. There's going to be a backlog because we effectively will have several weeks of things that were supposed to take place that didn't. I mean, Jordan, you and I were set to begin trial.
Yep.
And on Monday, 2 weeks ago, and we had 12 boxes, had our exhibits, we had our examinations ready, witnesses subpoenaed. We were ready to be on trial the entire week.
Yep.
And the judge basically said, this was in Lake County, Cook County had already closed. They were having a meeting that afternoon. He said, I think we're probably going to close. Don't know. Does it make sense? And sure enough, the court's closed. And so we had been working for weeks and weeks getting ready for that trial. It's not going to go. So now it's rescheduled for the end of April. Will it go then? You know, we're hoping, you know, but be patient and understand there will be some delays.
And, you know, I'm interested because I have no idea how this is going to play out either. But let's say your lawyers need more time to do something, or if you wanted to do more discovery, or if, you know, they missed a deadline and you have to do this and that and the other. Do you get more time to do that now? Like, do you get an automatic continuance, and does that extend everything out? You know, my argument would be no, absolutely not, because this is totally so unforeseen circumstance that just moves the date, and everything else should stand in place in time, except you're just moving the actual hearing date. And I think it would be unfair for the person who actually was diligent and did things on time to, you know, lose the benefit of their diligence in this process. But I think that's a really interesting issue, and I think people are going to stand before court and say, Judge, what's the prejudice? You know, why not? We had the time. So I think that's an issue I think is going to come up.
But again, don't bank on that. If you're on the side where you haven't exercised due diligence, and we've got that in our case that was set for trial. There were some things that it wouldn't surprise me if the other attorney came in and said, boy, Judge, we've had this extra time. We'd like to do this. No.
Yep.
You don't get to use the coronavirus to correct the things that you should have done. But again, that's going to be within the discretion of a lot of judges. Some might say, what's the harm? Let's allow it. And others are going to say, no, we had these deadlines and I'm going to stick to them. So it'll be interesting to see a lot of uncertainty in our lives. And there's even more uncertainty for us as divorce lawyers once the courts actually reopen, as to how are they going to manage this? It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's going to, there's going to be a lot of people in court in a very short period of time. So
Yep.
that'll be interesting.
Yep. You got
one more.
We got time for one more. Fire
I got
away.
one more. So one person said, I'm not receiving any support and I'm running out my credit cards. What do I do?
Man. So this is something that all of us are experiencing on one level or another. We just are. I actually, Jordan, a colleague of ours had texted and said they've been speaking with the chief judge up in the 19th district and trying to see if the courts would entertain motions for fee hearings so that attorneys could be paid. Because as you know, in our office, we have 40 some lawyers. We have, that many or more, maybe 50, 60 staff persons that are working. They're working remotely and doing the best they can, but we continue to have payroll. We continue to have rent that's due. We're issuing subpoenas. We have to write checks that go with subpoenas. All this stuff just is business as usual in terms of the expense side. We talked about this in another podcast. I got a real estate developer. His whole livelihood is based upon the real estate that he owns and people paying rents, large commercial rents, residential rental. If people aren't paying the rent because they don't have the money because they're not getting it, the whole system starts to break down. And so we keep saying the same thing about the uncertainty. And, if you are in a job, for example, where you're hoping to get some government relief and they passed, trillions of dollars is being printed to try to help people out, but it's not in people's pocket yet. So if your child support was due today, Friday the 27th, and you didn't get paid because you've been out of work for 2 weeks, and you don't have the savings to pay it, are you in contempt of court? Again, I think there's going to be some expectation that, and I'm saying no one's getting a free pass. Doesn't mean you might not owe the money, but I don't think people are going to get thrown in jail when the courts are reopened because you missed a child support payment. But remember, your kids still need to eat.
Right.
People's mortgages need to be paid. So do your best. And sometimes credit cards might be the way to supplement things. You don't want to rely on them.
But think about if you're on the receiving end. Like if you're a parent and has 2 children at home and you're spending the majority of the time with the children and you're not working and there are situations where there's no money coming in.
Sure. Other than the support or maintenance. Yeah.
Other than the support or maintenance. Right. So
Yep.
What do you do? I mean, I guess, and actually, what I found in one case that I have is that the other counsel, everyone's kind of come together to understand what's happening. And they've actually been very receptive to working out an agreement and are responsive in that, though I don't have that confidence in a lot in the system, honestly. And so I think, again, you just need to get the issue out there, reach out, kind of the squeaky wheel gets the oil in this respect. Yeah. And I think file your motion and you get into court as quickly as possible.
Yeah. It's we keep coming back to a couple of common themes. One is there's a lot of uncertainty. And if someone's on a podcast or anywhere else telling you they've got all the answers, they don't. Nobody does, because this is not like anything anyone has seen before. And so there's a lot of questions that are being raised and not a lot of clear answers. And what we keep saying is be reasonable, try to find ways to kind of get through this, exercise common sense, and understand that there will come a point in time where we can hopefully make things right if things fell behind, if more money is owed. But to me, always focus on the children. You've got kids in a lot of these situations. They didn't ask for this. They know mom and dad might be having a tough time too. Try to work it out. Try to figure it out. Try to do what's best for them. And let's all hope and pray that, come next week or the week after, we're back in action and things open up again and businesses are open up again and we can go out to dinner and we can enjoy ourselves again. Let's hope that stuff's coming. But if it's not, you got to keep working together. So first of all, thanks again. I know in these crazy times, we're looking for outlets, and we hope that, Jordan and I talking about some of these real life issues are helpful to you guys, maybe entertaining at a certain point. You can always contact us at Beermann. We are always available to answer questions and help you even during these periods of sheltering. Our website is www.beermannlaw.com. That's as my shirt says here. B as in boy, EERMANNLAW.com. I'm James Quigley, Jordan Rosenberg. Thanks again for joining, and everyone be safe and be well.
Thanks, everybody.